So our session today, we want to talk about SQL backups. Why talk about backups? Because what you want your database to say to you when you have an issue is this, right? This is what you want to say. You want to have it say, "I'll be back." And unfortunately, too many times, organizations have approached us and been like, "Hey, can you help get us back?" And sometimes we can, and sometimes we can't. Either way, it's generally an expensive proposition. And so one of the things we wanted to do was talk a little bit about how you can help ensure that your systems are backed up. And we'll talk through, again, from a 101 perspective, right, why this is important. So in fact, we have, and I'm going to shout out to Ryan here. So Ryan, we are working with Ryan, I should say, and had a situation, right, where somebody updated all the records in the table, and he's like, I'd like to go back, right? I'd like to get that information back. And so backups became important then. And even going through that process, we found that we wanted to make a tweak, right, to help protect ourselves better. So in terms of why we're talking about this is because, we want to make sure that folks have the protection that they need there. Okay, so in order to help with a little bit of this, we need to remind ourselves how the database works. So the relational database management systems are ultimately there to keep track of changes, right? I'm going to be constantly changing things, updating, inserting, deleting, and I want my database to keep track and to know where I am at any given time, really, right? Because that's going to, every second things are going to change. So the way that it does that is the following, right? So when you hit SQL Server and you run a query, in this case, we're running an update statement, right? Let's see, right? So I'm running my query. That query gets sent to memory, and it's going to be like, hey, in this case, I'm updating the table cat. We're using our Learn from SQL database. And I want to set all the names to Carlos because it's such a great name, right? Why wouldn't you all name your cats that? So that goes to memory. SQL Server is going to be like, oh, okay, hey, let me grab that data. I will start piecing that together for you. And I am going to write that transaction to the log. Okay. Now, once I've written to the log and I know that I can keep track of it, it's written down for me, I'm complete. My transaction is complete. I can go tell the next person, hey, you're welcome to update. Okay. Later on, there's a process called a checkpoint that runs that's going to take the actual changes, right, and then write them back to the file, right? And hopefully your storage is a little bit faster than these notepads here, right? But so that's the process. So we have things that are right to the transaction log that we want to keep track of, and then later things get committed to the data file. Okay, so because these processes are going on, the way that the database behaves or keeps track of each change can vary, right? Depending on some settings that we specify. So those settings are through our recovery models. So SQL Server has 3 recovery models, right? Full, bulk logged, and simple. So let's take a quick peek at each of these and talk about why they're used. Okay, so the first being simple. So we're going to start with simple because it is, I don't know if the least complex is the right word, right? But SQL Server does some cleanup for us, right, in that behalf. So what we see is, again, so we just mentioned that my transaction comes and it's going to start inserting data, or inserting changes into the log file. Okay. What happens, or when the database is in simple mode, is that as soon as that transaction is complete, it marks that portion of the log as done, or as complete, if you will. Right? Then there could be another transaction, right? Again, I mark that as complete, and it continues to go. Okay. So what the reason this is then important is because the way it's going to treat that log file or those changes is that when it gets to the end and it says, hey, where do I need to write the next change? It can go back to the beginning of the file and start there. Okay. Because these pieces are marked as complete, it will start from the beginning. Okay. Now, there are instances when, and we're gonna go over here, where your either transaction is too long, right? So a lot of times the big one that we see is index maintenance jobs can chew through some log file sometimes, right? And so your log file may need to increase, right? So again, everything's kind of stops, the log file increases, that transaction can write, and it finishes up. When the database is in full recovery mode, after the transaction is done, SQL Server will mark it as complete. So this growth is dictated by our auto growth settings here in the database. So again, I'm using my Learn SQL example, and we are, in this case, we're growing by 64 megabytes, which we would probably increase if it was me. I just left it at default there. To my everlasting shame. Don't judge me too harshly, compañeros. Okay. So, oh yeah, okay, so we're growing. So again, the what's the word I'm looking for? The characteristic of a simple database model is that my transaction log will be marked as complete after it's done. So the other recovery model, is bulk logged. Okay. Now you'll remember, right, that we have a transaction that comes through. It needs to get recorded here into the log. Well, what we can do with bulk log, and particularly we see this a lot with ETL transformations, right? I'm bringing in a whole bunch of data, right? So a nightly load, a data warehouse is a perfect example of this, right? Where I have all this data that's going to come in. Sometimes I do a delete and bring in the data. So what we can do with the bulk logged mode is we can reduce the amount of data that actually gets written to this transaction. So SQL Server is just going to say, hey, you know what? Instead of writing, this much data to my database, I'm going to write this much data. Excuse me, I said that wrong. Instead of writing this much data to the log, all the data is going to end up in the data file, right? We're just talking about the log. Instead of writing all that to the log, I'm just going to say, hey, you know what? I made this humongous change, right? And I can move forward. Now, why does that then, or what does that do for me? One of the challenges that we have, and even why do we even talk about these recovery models, right? So one of the issues that we have is we need to keep track of the log chain. When we do backups so that we can recover, right? So the question is, where do you want to recover to? At what point? And so a lot of times, again, using so in the day, I have an issue. I want to recover right up to the minute before that issue as closely as I can. I have a data warehouse that needs to load. I can simply reload that, or I can go back to yesterday and then reload, right? So there are going to be different options available to me. I just need to considerations, perhaps. There are different considerations for me. I just need to make sure that I understand what my business wants, and that I then make sure that my log chain is available, right? Because what we don't want to have happen is the log chain to break. This then, so it's not necessarily insurmountable, but particularly if we don't know where all of the chain is, then all of a sudden when we're starting to do that restore, right, our emotions are a little bit more like this, right? We're not happy campers, right? And our users are frustrated, right? Et cetera, et cetera. So we want to make sure that we have that we understand that process and can get to it. So this is one of the things that we see in terms of the way backups are handled, is if they're not quite understood, or you have like a Veeam or something, and you're still trying to do backups in SQL Server, the log chain could break, meaning you have two owners of backups, and that can be problematic, right? Okay, so one of the things that you'll see in looking at, if I'm looking to back up a database, is that there is a copy only option. So when we go to take the backup, what this means basically is, hey, I want to take this backup, but I don't want this to be part of your chain. Don't reset anywhere in the logs what has been backed up with this backup. I want you to rely on your overnight backup process, your daily process. I'm taking this backup for a very specific reason, but I don't want to interfere with what it is that you're doing. Again, because of that log chain. Okay, and it appears that so I've somehow skipped over my full. No, that's what I did. And so when you have a full database recovery, right? What it means, and I guess I'm gonna have to go back here to show my example, right? Is that ultimately the log will not be cleared until and the log will continue to grow until you take a log backup. So you have to have the log backup. The log backup is what will clear will clear the log so that it can then be overwritten. Otherwise, it will just continue to append and append and append. Even if you've taken the full backup, if your database is in full recovery model, you must also do a log backup. So there you go. Hopefully that made sense. So we don't want to be sad, right? We want to be happy. So let's take a peek at how we're going to do that. So in our backup types, we've got 3 types that we need to talk about. So the first one, full, right? You've eaten too much for Christmas and you feel full, right? No, not that kind of full. So when we talk about full backups, we are ultimately talking about making a copy of both the data file and a portion of the log file. Not necessarily all the log file, because you can take a backup and still be running transactions. Depending on how long the backup is, size of the database, how many transactions, etc. Some of those may get into the backup. Some of those may wait until may not be part of the backup from a log perspective, right? So what we have is we have the ability to recover both the data and the log file to that point, to the point that the backup was taken, right? A lot of times, what we see is that organizations will try and treat this like a PDF or a Word document and just try to log up just try to back up that file. So in this case, the F, so this learn SQL, the MDF file. And unfortunately, we've seen organizations forget about the log file, and then we have trouble, because what happens then is the database is not in a consistent state. It's not able to recover, and that's bad news, right? So the SQL Server has some a certain integrity that it wants to keep, and if the database can't get back, can't move those transactions back and forth, then it's not happy, and it may not let you into your data, right? And again, then we got the sad face going on again. So Fool's point in time, I'm taking a copy of both the data and the log, right? I'm also marking in that, in the timeline, if you will, hey, I took my backup here, right? I'm making a mark. Now, if we do differential backups, right? Differential backups will back up, again, a portion of the data file and a portion of the log file that has changed since the last full backup. So what will not happen is if you were to take 2 differential backups in a row, that second differential backup is going to, you'll forgive me, let me throw out some dates here. I take a full backup on Sunday night, 10 p.m. I take a differential backup Monday night, 10 p.m. I take another differential Tuesday night, 10 p.m. When I run the 10 p.m. Tuesday differential backup, it ignores the Monday differential backup. It's going to go back to Sunday and say, hey, what has changed since then? So what we are then able to do is that once that finishes, I can then use the full backup from Sunday, the differential backup from Tuesday, and I can get all of my data back, right? That has changed. But we know that we don't want to just take backups during the day. We have changes that happen during the day. Our users are in there, they're updating the system, and we may need to take a peek at the transaction log. Okay, so again, you'll remember that with the transaction log, all of the transactions are writing to the log, and what we want to do is we want to mark that as complete. So the next time that it runs, instead of the yellow being the active portion, if you will, right, it's going to mark that as done and or as complete, and then be overwritable. Once it gets to this point, you'll forgive me, I don't have my yellow marker here, but I can start at the beginning and basically overwrite the log, if you will. So this is going to help me ensure that my log file stays in a somewhat consistent size. And yeah, I guess that's the big thing, right? So that my log file stays at the same size, it doesn't continue to grow, right? We can be reuse. Okay, so one of the challenges, and we'll jump into the demo here in a moment, but I didn't want to switch back and forth between PowerPoint and the server. But one of the challenges here is knowing what your backups actually look like. There is a report in SQL Server Management Studio, which I'll show you, that will give you the backup history. But that's database by database. And we thought there would be a nice way. We thought there should be a way for you to see the backup history for all the databases in the instance. And so we've created a report in reporting services that you can run in Management Studio, and it will show you the date and give you a little, it will give you our take, right, on whether your backups are in good shape or not, right? You can download that here at this URL, and you'll forgive me, I seem to have misplaced the short URL. So it is navigable. This is navigable from our website. So so when you think about how to do the backups, right? There is generally one mind that comes to play, and what has become I'm going to call it the community standard, not necessarily the industry standard, but the community standard. And that is, these are scripts written by a guy, the name of Ola Hallengren, over at ola.hallengren.com. So his maintenance solution is downloadable and will allow you to do your database backups, your integrity checks, and your index optimizes. Now, there is still a role and a place for maintenance plans. So one of the nice things about OLA stuff is it's robust, it's very customizable, it gives you lots of flexibility. However, you then have to understand stored procedures. You have to feel comfortable getting in and looking at T-SQL. I mean, the older versions actually would run, with a SQL CMD command. So getting in there and making changes, there's no interface to it. It's all parameter-driven stored procedures, and that can be challenging. So I have seen instances where organizations have chosen to hey, I don't think I'm going to have SQL Data Partners around all the time. I'm going to stick with maintenance plans to do my backups. And I can't fault them for that idea, because they want to be able to get in there, understand, and make changes when it's needed. So I feel like there still is a place. But if you're looking to level up, right, then OLA is the place. And those of you who are working with us, that's what's running your backups. Okay, and so then here from the slide perspective, right, weird scenarios. And here's where I'm actually interested in getting some thoughts. So SQL Server has introduced the backup to the cloud option in 2014. 2014? No, 2012 Service Pack. It was a Service Pack. That's what it was. Service Pack. One of the Service Packs. Can't remember which one. They changed the security options available to you. Right, integrated that a bit more, so it wasn't quite so cumbersome to set up. But I'm curious, is there anybody who is running backups directly to Azure Blob Storage? I'm going to take that as a no. So I have found this to be, again, a only in the lab, right? Ernest says, yeah. So I think it's an interesting feature. Obviously, somebody requested it. So, there's got to be somebody out there using it. I just haven't seen it as a, right, as what's the word? It feels very one-off-ish to me, right? It feels very like, hey, I'm only going to do, oh, here we go, Costa. So he's using it. Okay, so Costa, I need you to raise your hand, and I want you to come on stage, and I want you to talk about why you had to do backup to the cloud. Can you do that for me? So up on the chat on the right-hand side, if you click raise your, or actually I think it's in the stage. Raise your hand. I'm going to bring you up. Here we go. Oh, do you not have a mic? It appears I don't have a way to. Oh, you're here. There we go. So Costa, take me through, right? I am inquiring minds want to know, right? So you mentioned a manual solution. What was your scenario? Why did you end up going with backup to the cloud?
So this was we were setting up a solution in Azure so SQL Server configured on the VMs.
Okay.
So not using like a PaaS solution or anything like that. So it was just migrating to Azure, we're setting up new VMs, installing SQL Server, and configuring it that way. So instead of we didn't have like a tool solution in place. So looking to do something other than just a file share, we went down the direction of configuring backups directly to blob storage.
So now,
The management was the really hard part, which is where I mentioned we essentially had to have PowerShell scripts to enumerate the files and be able to bring them back and do the things that you need to do with the backups.
right. Now, was that just for the migration piece, or did you continue to use that after you had migrated?
We continued to use that after we migrated.
Okay, interesting.
We have since then looked at, making it a little easier, because as you can imagine, maintaining that script and the knowledge is somewhat of a weaker point in the solution.
Okay.
Since then, we've looked at, moving towards a solution. I know Azure has come up with additional tools since we've done that as well to help with that. But anyway, I'll stop there.
No, awesome. So thank you, right? Thank you for that. And let's see, I may need Amanda to help me. Thank you. Yeah, so the manager there. So I think, again, kind of a unique scenario, right? Hey, we had this one thing to do. That upkeep was a little bit of a challenge. Yeah, so thank you, Costa, for that. So the other scenario, so Mariano in the previous session was talking about availability groups. So you can, availability groups ultimately come in two flavors, right? There is standard edition and then there's enterprise edition. The difference being is that standard is just for DR purposes, and that secondary node is just for DR, and you can do nothing from it. Not even the backups will run from the secondary. If you're using standard, right, you can do other things to that secondary node, and you can do things like backups from that. I'm always a little, I wouldn't say weary, but I am generally a fan of trying to do backups on the primary, just so that I am not worried about particularly if I'm in asynchronous mode, right? You're allowing a bit of lag in there if you're doing the backup from the secondary in asynchronous mode. If you're in synchronous mode, right, then that argument obviously doesn't stand up. But then you're more than likely, you're in the same data center, you're in Azure, your SQL servers are right next to each other, in that sense, and it may not matter. So those are some of the weird scenarios, right? So having said that, let me pop over here. Here we go. So you all can see my screen. Let's see. I'm gonna flip these here so that I can look at y'all instead of. Oh, except I'm sharing the wrong screen. So let me share the other screen now. I'm like, I've got some mirroring effect here going on. That's kind of interesting. Okay, here we go. So I mentioned a couple of things in the slide. So number one is the report that we've created to help organizations figure out what their backup status is. So this is what it looks like, and they are coded. Again, this is our test database, and so we haven't been keeping up with our backups very well. Red meaning that you have no backups or that it's been too long. And I think I may have gotten an old version here, because this should also be read based on the date, the length of the last full backup. But in this example, you can see, right, that I have a full recovery model database that has a full backup, but does not have a log backup, right? And so that's a warning in our books. So again, you can download that report. And so, compañeros, one of the things, particularly here, we're looking for feedback, right? So let us know what you think. Is it helpful? Do you like it? Whatnot. Now, I mentioned the report. So if I go here, I can do through the standard reports. Depending on the version of SQL Server Management Studio that I have. But I believe if you're running version 19, you should be okay. Now now watch me. Oh, 18. Okay, 18.10. So this is 18. Even so I can't remember when they added that, and you'll forgive me for not knowing. But standard reports, I can go in here. Again, I'm looking at that database, and because there's no backups there, there's not too much to that. Okay, so we want to take a backup of a database, right? Fairly straightforward. I am connected to my database server. I want to go into tasks, and I have two ways of doing this, right? I can always, depending on the complexity of what I want, I can. I find it for some folks easier to use the GUI. Once you do it a couple of times, doing it from the command line is not terribly complicated. So again, right, do as I say, not as I do, compañeros, but we would probably not be backing up our database to the C drive, right? That's a bad practice. So you know what? I am not going to do that, and I'm going to back up someplace different, compañeros. So I'm going to go over here. We're going to go down to the F drive, and again, whoosh, probably not any better because I don't know about permissions here. I didn't figure out or didn't resolve all of those. So I want to make sure I have a place that I can write to. And then let's see, 1026, 2021, top back. So here we go. Now in this case, again, you saw that I can do the different pieces. You will get an error if I try to do a differential here. I'm going to get an error because I have not first performed a full backup. Right, so let me do the full backup option there. And I click OK, and there we go, and I'm done. Now, the other piece that we talked about, that's not where I wanted to go. In the event that you need to give this to a vendor, right? Somebody's asking for your database, they want to look at it, they're doing something. I would recommend getting in the habit of using the copy-only backup. Again, as we talked about that chain, right? That's going to become important. Let's see. So now if I refresh this, I should see some data now, right? So there is where I took except I did the Learn SQL database, didn't I? Back tasks, reports, here we go. Standard reports. There we go. Okay, if I wanted to do that through T-SQL, right? The commit backup database, I give it the name of the database. So to disk. So to disk is generally going to be the location. Now there you'll see there was a tape option. I'm generally not seeing too many folks back up to tape from SQL Server Management Studio. That's generally going to, I shouldn't say generally. My experience, my limited experience is that is through a third-party software. That's going to then back it up to tape for you. I won't say 100% of the time. So current state, I mean, 15 years ago, that might have been different, but now generally I'm seeing folks use a Veeam or something if they're going to go to tape. Now, while I do have a local path here, I could also very well, go in and, put in a whack network share. That also works. The only caveat to that would be that I need to make sure that the service account that's running my SQL Server has access to that network share. Okay, and so in this case, I'm using the with stats just so that it will let me know how quickly that runs. So now if I run that, I should now have a backup there. So doing the log, right, very similar. You go in, and we've kind of seen that. Once you've seen that, you've kind of seen them all. The trick is going to be, how do I automate those pieces, right? So we've already talked about maintenance plans. And I can go in and you can set up a maintenance plan to do the backups, and that's great. If you want to get started with the OLA scripts, the OLA scripts are going to do a couple of things. One, it's going to create a table. Two, it's going to create stored procedures that need to be stored somewhere. Even though the script defaults to master, I do not place those objects in the master database. I want them outside. And the reason is paranoid about corruption. I want to reduce the size of my system databases as much as possible. So I want to create a secondary database to keep all of this stuff, right? So I would change that. In this case, I could do the learn SQL. And then the third thing which is optional if you want it to create is, do you want it to create the jobs? Okay, so these will actually create the backup, right? It'll create a differential, a log backup. And then we mentioned that it also does some other maintenance pieces. It will create those maintenance jobs as well. So the backup directory is where you want your files to be. I need to put those in single quotes. And again, generally here, I am looking at some kind of network location to specify those. So cleanup time is going to be how long do you want those backups to hang around? This is going to depend on your backup size and how much space you have in your backup location, right? So this is a rule of thumb. I'm not saying this is a great time, but 168 hours is a week. I like that. It gives me a couple of days, right? Particularly the weekend, right? Something happens on Friday. I don't find out about it till Monday. I know that I have sufficient backups, right? So this log to table is what is going to log all of the commands to that command log table, incidentally enough. So if you specify that, it will create that table and everything will get logged there. So once you do that, right? Yep, you can run that. It will go through, create everything, and then you will see jobs now. These are all the jobs that it created. So none of these jobs were here before. So you can see there's quite a few that are there and available. Let's see. So I've taken you through maintenance plans. We talked about OLA stuff. We have talked about the reports of how to get or find out, right, what my backup status is. And now, see if I refresh this, that should change, right? Okay, hey, I've got full. And so you notice this one changed to white. It is simple. I have my full backup, right? So in our minds, it's good, right? Whether or not you need to be in simple or full mode recovery model is entirely up to the requirements for you to be able to restore. And we actually have a podcast episode on this, and I'm going to ask Amanda to help get that URL because I don't remember it offhand, where we talk about this. And ultimately, one of the thoughts that we had was that you can lean on the business for this information. Now, generally, they're going to, we talked about the 5 nines, right? Everybody wants 5 nines of availability. And that's fine. Just be prepared to have a conversation with them in terms of, well, I don't want any, right, data loss. Okay, what's that going to mean? Generally, right, I'm not the stock exchange, right? I'm not a bank, right, or a financial services company. But generally, organizations, manufacturing, right, printing, even warehousing to a certain degree, 15 minutes, right? All of a sudden, you're close enough now that the business can recover, should it need. But again, that's going to be a conversation that you have. Your data warehouse may only need once a day, right? Again, your transactional systems may need more frequently. I know we referenced this, but this is where folks get, I won't say complacent, but they may think that the Veeam or the third-party software is taking care of their backup, is taking care of their recovery point objective, meaning the point you want to get back to. when in reality, all it's set up to do is to do a full backup nightly, right? And that's where you may have a discrepancy in terms of what do I need? What does my data actually need? What does the business expecting of me, right? And what am I actually doing? So that has been a conversation that we're encouraging people to have before rather than later. Because again, right, once you get to the fact and the database is blown up or it's had ransomware, and then you're trying to answer those questions, right? We're back to the sad face. So thank you, Amanda. Right. So we have the recovery, the RTO and RPO episode, which I feel like is going to be an extension of this conversation. So with that, I think that is it. I don't know, Mariano, if you are around, but you're welcome to come back up. I'm taking a quick peek at the Q&A, and I don't see any. I feel like we've gotten all the questions answered. We unfortunately have put all the people to sleep, and now we.
But the backups are the more important things that you have to take care as a database administrator.
Sure.
We have a saying here.
One-on-one stuff, right? Yeah.
We have a saying here in Argentina that the brave ones are those who can restore, who can back up the databases.
That's right.
Okay, we have a question here. If you're taking a full analog backup, will taking an ad hoc full backup break the chain? It depends.
So that's where you have to take the that copy only, basically, right? So if you're taking the regular backup, then the chain is saying, hey, again, I'm an ad hoc full backup, but just to use the example I was going with. So Sundays at 10 p.m., full differential on Monday, differential on Tuesday. I take one today. It's 4:04 Eastern time. I take a full backup. The next time I run a transaction log or the next time I run a differential, it's going to go back to that 404 as the source, right? So, now that's not to say that you couldn't, like if I'm using Ola Hallengren's solution and I want to run that and I keep it in the same place, right? So I can recover, that's okay, right? But if I'm going to do a backup and send it off to a vendor, right, for them to review, or give it to somebody else, restore it to dev. If I'm taking it away from that system or taking it away from where the normal backups go, then absolutely yes, I'm putting just full and log. Yeah. So in this case, right, I have the log every hour, whatever, right? Same thing applies. I take that full backup 404, then my log is going to get reset, if you will, to. So the 415 log, right, is going to want to use the full backup taken at 404.
Okay, we'll mark it as answered. So one thing that I have a question, what is your recommendation in terms of dev or test environments?
Yeah, so backups are our friends, right? So we want. I am pro backup. However, generally this comes down to space, right? So how much storage space do I have, and how long do I need to keep them? For our customers, for example, unless they say otherwise, I want to take a full backup once a week of the dev environment, right? Now, obviously something critical is happening, right? That could change. But a lot of times, and I may or may not. So generally I am going to err towards not worrying about differentials in the development environment until I am told otherwise. And again, that's generally for space constraints. I want to keep, if anything, I want to keep a little bit more production backups around, right? And so that's where that's my tendency there.
Great.
Yeah. Okay, with that, we're going to say adieu. Thanks again. Thanks, Mariano.
Thank you very much. See you tomorrow.
Yep. See you tomorrow.
SQL Data Partners.